Welcome to another exciting episode of In the Chute, where Calen tries to play stump the chump with the old man. What kind of thing are we talking about today, Calen? Bring it on.
Uh, Energy sources on the ranch. So things like propane, wood, maybe some cow patties if we're getting real desperate.
Bacon
What
and
are the
eggs in the morning.
yeah, what are some energy sources that we use on the ranch? We are in a windy area and there are wind turbines in the area, but we don't actually have any. And we've had a video, and I'll throw it up there, of the weather station of you and mom setting it up that one time. But what are some of the energy sources we use to sustain everything going, like equipment, the house, all that stuff?
Well, I mean, really, it's fossil fuel. It's diesel. We got a tractor that runs diesel. It's really the only thing we have that really runs on diesel right now. Of course, we got a fuel tank or gas. Vehicles, generator, uh, chainsaws, you name it. There's a lot of tools that are motorized that we have to use, a side by side, a four wheeler. Um, so those are kind of the mainstays, but really, electricity is king. Unfortunately, we all of us, with a rare exception, are pulling stuff off of the grid. And there's a couple of places here locally where they've had small wind turbines for decades, and they're throwing some power back on the grid. And with just the wind we have, we're a windy area, so there's some pretty good sized wind turbines, whether you like them or not. They're there. Uh, for me, the jury's out on that, whether or not they're really that usable, because they do destabilize the grid. you know, there's there's all kinds of issues there when they go south and they're no longer usable. Guess what happens? They don't really decay, and you can't recycle them. You can't throw them away. I mean, they just don't decay. So there's issues there, but they are in the area. I mean, they're pushing some power here and there.
The
Um,
thing that breaks my heart with the wind turbines, though, is because we get so windy. Like, you would think the more wind, the more power you can create. But there's times where even those big turbines, they go, nope, we got to pause it. And
right.
they lock up the turbine so it doesn't get broken,
But
essentially,
yeah,
because of the wind gusts. And that's
yeah,
the
they'll
part that,
overspeed.
yeah, it just kind of breaks my heart. I'm like, man, you could be using this for energy right now, but if you did, it would probably fall apart.
Oh,
That
it
hurts.
definitely will. I mean, there's videos out there of some of these large wind turbines, wind farms that their governor on there doesn't work, and that thing just overspeeds out of control and has a coming apart party. Kind of a bad deal. There's some, and it this tears me up is, um, and I'm all for some, being able to do some alternate type of energy. Why not? If it's there and it's feasible, it's affordable, even over some time, why not do it? Why not try it? But we've got some solar arrays going in different places that are, some of them are enormous,
Yeah.
and take some ground out of production. But I don't know how well they work. I see a lot of times they've got, because of the wind in the area, they've got a fail safe that they follow the sun. They do track the degree in the sky from a point from the east to west of where they're at, and they track the sun so that they get the maximum number of photocells being activated, and therefore the higher production. But they also have a fail safe on those as well, that when the wind's too high, they'll go to flat so that they don't get tore up
All right.
or lifted up like a kite. And you see them quite a bit where they're laying flat. When they lay flat with the wind, and then you get snow piled on them, or and then the snow turns to ice, they're covered. So there's some
Yeah.
there's some real challenges there too. But
Well, and that's another thing too, that the loss of production ground. We had this conversation. I had a whole rant in the pickup one day
yeah,
about
you did.
how upset that made me, because you can use it for grazing, you can use it for crops, things that are continually. I've made this point before with building houses, subdivisions, stuff like that. Now it's solar arrays. The ground is there. It's still not turned up into asphalt or anything, but it's now been replaced by these solar panels that are above it, so it's unusable. The problem is, I wish they would put those, not that I'm against it, I just wish they would place it on unusable ground. Being we have a lot of rocky rim rock type areas. I wish that engineers or anybody who's implementing it would actually sink in, the posts that would support it into the unusable sandstone or the rock or the rocky areas where animals are normally not going to graze or you can't cultivate crops, and that use those unusable areas to generate production while still leaving the land so it's prosperous for agriculture. But I don't know. Maybe I'm out to lunch on that. Maybe somebody thinks they're smarter than me. I don't know. I just feel like there's another solution to using the unusable stuff, which we've talked about before as well. You can have hundreds of acres of land, but if it's all rocky, it's unusable. Well, let's use that unusable stuff towards usable alternative energy.
Yeah, I mean, I can't disagree with that. There's a spot just outside of Billings. I think we pointed that out to you. And what caused
Mhm.
your rant was,
Yeah, that's
yeah, we come over the top of a hill that's, forever been grazing, and not bad grazing at all. Some pretty open, decent grassland. But when you come down over this hill, and you look down at it, it looks like a lake. There's so
mhm.
many solar panels out there in the distance, and you're probably talking 3-4 miles away, but it looks like a lake, and because the reflection off of it, it's like wow. I mean, and I don't know what kind of production that has, if it's feasible, if it works, if it's unstable. I have no idea. I haven't heard, and I don't know that it's been up long enough to really make much of a difference. But there are small arrays going around all over the place. And again, I'm not opposed to it. I just think, like yourself, it could be done in a little better place,
More
uh,
efficient is kind of what I'm
more
looking at.
efficient. Yeah,
Yeah.
but you know what? Um, that all depends on whose ground it is. And you may have somebody
True.
who's got a really good spot, and they go, you know what? I don't believe in that stuff. Don't want it. Don't like it. That's their right.
Yeah.
They don't have to have that. So, and you've always got somebody who's willing to do whatever it takes. If they can pull some cows off of a piece of ground and put some arrays up, and they essentially have a contract with a place where they're not worried about what the electricity is doing, whether it's making or not. They've got a contract for this thing to sit there, a
Right.
lease. That's income for them, and I get that. That's a steady source of income that may or may not be very good or much better than cattle. Probably not losing any money on it unless they're not getting paid.
Right.
So I
Uh,
mean, there's all kinds of nuances to that you don't know, but we don't have any water
no.
right here on the ranch that, and we could honestly, we could do some very small generation of with water coming out of that spring, and turn a little turbine and do it. I mean, that could be done. It certainly would not power a house. I mean, it would be just some
Right.
lights and some very very rudimentary type, almost like a solar panel where you would have to charge some batteries on it, because in real time it's not going to turn that much. It's not going to have that big of an effect on a generator.
Let's go back to some of the well, there's one that's renewable. We'll start there first. Wood. You got a
Yeah.
stove, saved a couple calves this year. What kind of energy, like human energy, goes into getting that all set up for a wood stove?
Well, it's substantial. You got to, and we have it hauled in by the truckload. So you got a semi logging truck that brings in um, somewhere between 12 to 15 cord of wood. And a cord, of course, is a solid piece of wood, 4 foot by 4 foot by 8 foot. That's the definition of a cord. And so it's hard to tell, exactly what's there when somebody fills a pickup up a split wood. That's not exactly a cord if you did that, because there's air gaps, there's space in between there. But so that's why there's a guesstimate of exactly how many cord, but it's somewhere around 12 to 15. We cut that up, split it, and then have it, just burn it in the wood stove. And it is a supplemental heat for the house that's along with electricity, with a fan that helps blow that past that firebox or through the firebox and heats the house up. It does make a difference in
Mhm.
how much propane we use for a boiler to heat the rest of the house. So alternative type of heat source. It's good for an emergency. If we run out of heat or electricity, we can still heat. We can there's another stove in the basement that'll do the same thing, and then we can start that up. It's piped into the chimney as well, along with the wood stove, and we can heat the house using that as in an emergency. So that fir wood or cottonwood wood is there, and we have it hauled in, prep it, and we need to cut some wood when you're home, I think.
I did already. All right.
Yeah, we'll get that wood splitter out, that hydraulic one, and do high production instead of going out there with a splitting
Yeah.
maul. And which is, you know what, I enjoy splitting wood. I really do. I know it sounds goofy, but
Okay.
if anybody ever has anything, kind of bothering them, go split a bunch of
That's
wood
true.
for an hour. That'll take care of some of that anxiety and anger issues if you have them.
Now, the last one I wanted to talk about was the diesel. You touched on it slightly. We got diesel for the tractor
Hmm.
and now Dinner Bell, the feed pickup.
Hmm.
The question I want to ask specifically though is for Dinner Bell. That is a pickup that's used to feed hay bales right now in the wintertime, and you can also use it for hauling at a later time for the horses and whatnot. Can can you use or will you use or do you use red dye diesel? And quickly, for anybody that's not familiar, what is red dye diesel and what are some of the parameters for it?
It's the same as regular diesel, except it's got dye added to it. And what they do is they just mark it that way because it's for agriculture, or not necessarily agriculture. It's
It's like
off-road
off-road.
use.
Yeah.
Anytime you buy any kind of fuels in Montana, you have a 50 cent per gallon tax for road use. Well, if you're not using something on the road, do you have to pay that tax? And the answer is no, as long as you're using it off road. And 50 cents a gallon adds up. That's a
Mm-hmm.
that's a big tax. So that's a very good question about that, because I'm a stickler for, you know what, you follow the dang law. And I've never stuck red dye diesel in that pickup because it's mainly been used on the highway or roads. We use it off road too, but not enough to do that. So um, that's a very good question for a lot of people. If you're using it half and half and you're out there doing some fencing and using that thing out in the pastures, you're feeding with it, and that's all you're doing, is it okay to stick red dye diesel in it? And I think it is.
Yeah.
But if you're going to run down the road and you got to take a trip to Billings with a load of cattle, yeah, you should be sticking some regular diesel in that thing. The problem is, how do they know which is which? And you can be fined for that. That's a substantial fine. And I can't tell you what it is right now. I'd have to look it up. But if you're using off-road diesel for on-road use, um, that can be significant. So the problem with it is red dye. If you fill your fuel tank with red dye diesel and you run it out and you've been doing it around a ranch, you saw the fine, didn't you?
It's a minimum of 535 or a maximum of $1,000 or by imprisonment for not less than 30 days and not
Yeah.
more than 6 months. So if you're really pushing it the limit and you're angering the highway patrol, they'll knock you down.
Well, and that's not the highway patrol necessarily. They're the ones, the motor carrier services are the ones that really enforce that, right? They're like the DOT, Department of
Yeah.
Transportation. But you tell me that the tax man isn't serious about collecting
Oh,
his taxes.
yeah,
That's
good
what
point.
that's about.
Yeah.
It's about compliance. So, but if you fill a fuel tank full of red dye diesel, you use it and then you fill that up, or you've got some left over because you're not running it completely dry, and then you fill that with a full tank, as much, say you've got an eighth of a tank left or even a quarter tank of red dye diesel, and you put three-quarters of that tank of green regular diesel, what is that tank going to look like?
It's still going
Is
to
it
be
going to
pink
show
a little
red
bit.
dye? I
Yeah.
bet it's going to show some dye in there.
Yeah.
To which they're going to say, you're using dyed diesel. Well, so there's an argument there, that it can or cannot be used, and we'll have to see. I've never talked to a motor carrier services guy. I know a guy. I know a guy that I should ask him that question, because it's very, to me, I think it's a legitimate question.
Right.
But how are they going to know you're using it,
Yeah. No, that's a
right?
good point.
So at that point, I don't think they have the ability really to go and stab your tanks. I know they were doing that in some places. They were going to the stockyards here a few years ago and stabbing people's tanks to see what kind of diesel they had in it. And I'm thinking, I think there's a Fourth Amendment right to privacy.
Yeah, there's got to be at least a reason for doing that. You can't just go
You
around.
got to have probable cause. I mean,
Yeah.
probable cause, and then you got to, if you have probable cause and you want to do that, that's somebody else's property. You probably ought to get a warrant.
Right.
I mean, so there's all kinds of other issues that could be brought up there. But to answer your question simply, I haven't done it yet. But with this diesel pickup, yeah, I don't see why I shouldn't be able to if I'm using it off road. But
Sure.
yeah, diesel. Yeah, I did. I left out the pickup for that. But yeah, we've got diesel pickup and both pickups. The one that we haven't yet taken delivery on, it's diesel as well. And you know, I don't mind. I like gas, but that diesel, you cannot get the efficiency and the power out of a gas type engine like you can those diesels, and the longevity of them. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard to beat.
Well, that's energy sources on the ranch and the reasons why. So with that, we'll take that conversation and put it out to pasture.